She slammed both fists against the frozen sidewalk so hard her knuckles split open and bled onto the ice. And not a single person stopped. Maya Collins, daughter of one of the most powerful CEOs in Chicago, lay broken on the pavement in the dead of winter, her wheelchair shattered beneath her, her voice stolen by silence, her only words written in the desperate language of her hands, and the world walked right past her like she was nothing, like she was invisible. But across the street, through a fogged cafe window, one man looked up from his coffee at exactly the right moment. And everything, for both of them, was about to change forever. What happens next will make you question everything you believe about kindness, family, and what it truly means to be seen. Drop the name of the city you're watching from in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button. You're exactly where you're supposed to be. The cold that morning wasn't the kind that just chilled you. It was the kind that got inside you, crawled through your coat, your skin, your ribs, and sat there, squeezing. Chicago in January had a personality all its own. It didn't ask permission. It didn't apologize. It just pressed down on everything and everyone until the weak gave way. Maya Collins had survived a lot of things in her 26 years. She had survived the accident that took her legs. She had survived the silence that followed when the doctors explained she would never hear again. She had survived her father's money, her father's guilt, her father's slow and systematic erasure of who she actually was in favor of who he needed her to be. A symbol, a tragedy, a footnote in the biography of a powerful man. What she had never survived, not once in her life, was someone truly seeing her. Not looking at her, seeing her. That morning, on the corner of Michigan Avenue and Erie Street, Maya Collins fell. It wasn't dramatic, the way falls sometimes are in movies. No slow motion, no swelling music. The front left wheel of her motorized wheelchair hit a patch of black ice, hidden beneath a thin skin of new snow, and the chair lurched sideways with a mechanical groan, and then a crack, sharp and final, like a gunshot. The entire axle assembly on the left side gave out. The chair tilted hard, dropped, and threw her sideways onto the pavement before she could brace herself. She hit the ground shoulder first. The impact drove the air from her lungs. Her elbow cracked against the concrete, and her palm skidded across the ice, tearing open on the rough edge of the curb. For a moment she just lay there, stunned, staring up at the white Chicago sky. Get up. That was her first thought. It was always her first thought. It had been her first thought every single time life knocked her flat since she was 19 years old. Get up, Maya. Don't let them see you down. She pushed herself onto her side, then onto her stomach, then tried to push up onto her hands. Her left elbow screamed. She ignored it. She pressed her palms flat against the frozen pavement and pushed. Her legs, of course, did nothing. She looked at the wheelchair. The left front wheel was bent at an angle that made her stomach drop. The motor housing had cracked open on impact. She could see the wiring exposed beneath the casing. The chair was dead. It wasn't getting back up either. People walked past. She turned her head and watched them. Boots, shoes, heels clicking on the salted pavement. A man in a gray overcoat, talking into a Bluetooth earpiece, stepped around her without breaking stride. A woman in a red puffer jacket glanced down, made brief eye contact with Maya, and then looked away and kept walking. A teenager with headphones looked at his phone. Maya felt something she almost never allowed herself to feel anymore. Panic. Not just the physical kind, though that was real enough. The cold was already working its way through her coat. The pavement was leaching heat from her body in a way that wouldn't stop. not on its own. She couldn't feel her legs, which was nothing new, but she was starting to lose feeling in her hands, which was very much something she needed. She pressed her palms together and began to sign, rapid, frantic. "Help! Please! Help me!" Nothing. Of course nothing. Nobody was looking at her hands. Nobody was looking at her face. People who passed her stared ahead, or at their phones, or at the traffic, or at the sky. Anywhere, everywhere but down at the woman, flat on the pavement, who was signing with bleeding hands in the January cold. Maya Collins had grown up in a 17-room house in Lincoln Park. She had been educated by private tutors and a rotating cast of specialists. She had been given every advantage that her father's money could manufacture. And in none of that, not one day, not one lesson, had anyone taught her what to do when you were alone on the ice with a broken wheelchair and no voice and no one willing to look at you. She pressed her fists against the ground and hit it. Once, twice, hard enough to hurt. Still nothing. She hit it again, harder, and felt her knuckles split on the rough concrete, felt the sharp, bright sting of the cold air hitting the raw skin, and watched her blood, impossibly red against the white ice, spread in two small blooms beneath her hands. A man in a business suit stepped over her legs. He stepped over her legs. He didn't stop. He didn't look down. He just lifted one foot, cleared her legs, put it back down, and kept walking. Maya's jaw clenched so tight her teeth ached. She was not going to cry. She absolutely was not going to cry. She had not cried since the day she sat in a hospital bed at 19 years old, and her father stood at the foot of it and said in his measured boardroom voice, "We'll get through this, Maya. I'll take care of everything." And she had understood, in the way that you understand things that nobody says out loud, that take care of everything meant take care of this so it doesn't become a problem for me. She had not cried that day. She was not going to cry on a sidewalk in January. She pressed her bleeding hands flat against the ice, and she thought, very clearly and deliberately, "You are not going to die on Michigan Avenue. That is not the ending." She looked up. Across the street, maybe 40 feet away, there was a cafe. Warm yellow light behind the glass, the outline of people sitting at tables, the ghost of steam on the windows from the heat inside. She could see it. She could not get to it. Between her and it was a street, traffic, a curb she couldn't navigate, and a wheelchair that was going nowhere. She started trying to drag herself. Her arms were strong. Years of moving through a world not built for her had made them strong. But the ice gave her nothing to grip, and without the use of her legs, her body weight was almost entirely on her upper half, and the cold was slowing everything down. She managed about 18 inches before her elbow gave a warning pulse that told her if she kept going, she was going to damage something that mattered. She stopped. She lay still for a moment, face turned toward the cafe across the street, cheek against the cold ground. And that was when she saw him. Ethan Calloway was having what he privately considered to be a completely ordinary, terrible morning, which was the only kind of morning he'd had for the past 3 years. He was 44 years old. He was a single father of 2. He ran a small but mostly functional electrical contracting business that he had built from nothing after his wife left, which meant he was also the accountant, the scheduler, the project manager, and the guy who answered the phone at 7 in the morning, while simultaneously making 2 school lunches and locating 1 missing snow boot. This particular morning, he had gotten his daughters, Emma, who was 11, and possessed of a personality that could generously be described as strongly opinionated, and Lily, who was 8, and in a phase of deep emotional investment in every living creature she encountered. to the cafe on Michigan Avenue, which was a Tuesday tradition he'd started, when he realized that sitting in the same kitchen every morning was making all three of them slightly insane. The cafe was called Harbor Light, and it was warm, and it smelled like coffee and cinnamon. And for 45 minutes, every Tuesday morning, Ethan Calloway could drink one full cup of coffee while it was still hot and pretend, briefly, that he had his life together. He had his hands wrapped around his mug. He was looking at nothing in particular, the kind of unfocused stare that parents develop as a survival mechanism, present enough to register if someone was choking or bleeding, but distant enough to actually rest the brain for 30 consecutive seconds. Emma was talking. She was almost always talking. Today it was something about a project at school involving the solar system and the injustice of being assigned Saturn when everyone knew Jupiter was better. Jupiter has 79 moons, Dad. 79. Saturn's rings are just ice. It's literally just a big ball of gas with a hula hoop. Ethan said. Are you listening to me? Jupiter, 79 moons, hula hoop. I cannot believe you, Emma said, with the full authority of an 11-year-old who has been misunderstood by the universe. Lily was not talking. Lily was looking out the window, which was what Lily did when something outside was more interesting than what was happening inside, which was frequently. Ethan looked at her. She had gone very still. That got his attention. Lily in motion was normal. Lily still was not. Bug, he said, using the nickname that had started when she was 3 and couldn't stop talking about ladybugs. What are you looking at? Lily didn't answer right away. She pressed one small hand against the glass, fogging it with her breath, and leaned closer. Daddy, she said, very quietly. There's a lady on the ground. Ethan set down his coffee mug. He leaned across the table and followed her sightline through the window. The cold had fogged the glass in patches, but he could see the sidewalk across the street, the foot traffic, the parked cars, He saw her. A woman lying on the pavement, not sitting, not crouching, lying flat, one arm stretched out, the other bent beneath her. A wheelchair nearby, tilted wrong, clearly damaged. And people, a stream of people, walking around her, over her, past her, like she was a piece of furniture someone had left on the curb. Oh God, Ethan said. He was on his feet before he finished the sentence. Stay here, he told Emma, who had stopped talking about Saturn. Dad, stay here, Em. Watch your sister. He was already pulling on his coat, already moving toward the door. Don't move. He pushed through the cafe door, and the cold hit him like a wall. He crossed the street at something between a walk and a run, dodging between a cab and a delivery truck, hitting the opposite sidewalk and immediately moving toward her, angling through the stream of pedestrians who were still, somehow, just walking past. He got to her and crouched down. She was facing him, or she had turned to face him when she heard his footsteps. He wasn't sure which. And what he saw in her face was not what he expected. He had expected fear. He had expected the look of someone in crisis, someone falling apart. He had seen that look before. He had worn it himself, in the parking lot of a hospital 3 years ago, after the doctor used the word permanent about something he thought was temporary. What he saw in Maya Collins's face was not fear. It was fury. Cold, controlled, and absolutely furious. At the ground, at the chair, at the situation, at every single person who had walked past her, at herself for being here, at all of it. Her jaw was set, her eyes were dry. Her hands, bleeding, he noticed, really bleeding, were pressed flat on the ice, and she was absolutely fighting the urge to look relieved that he was there, because relief would mean she had needed someone, and she was not the kind of person who needed anyone. He recognized that, too. He'd spent a year being that person after the divorce. "Hey," he said. Then he stopped, because she hadn't reacted to his voice the way people did. Hadn't looked up at the sound. Had looked up at the movement of his approach. He looked at her face more carefully. Looked at the way her eyes were fixed on his lips. He said, more carefully and clearly, "Are you okay?" She watched his mouth. Then she shook her head, a sharp, economical no, and raised her hands and signed something rapid and precise. Ethan's heart did something complicated. He had learned American Sign Language 11 years ago. Not fluently, never fluently. He'd always meant to go back to it, and hadn't. But functionally. Because the woman he'd married had a younger sister who was deaf, and he had loved that woman enough to learn her sister's language. And the fact that the marriage had ended didn't mean the language had gone with it. He signed back. Slowly, haltingly, hoping it was right. "I can help. What do you need?" The fury in Maya's face shifted. Not disappeared. Shifted. Something flickered behind it. Something that might have been, very briefly, surprise. She signed, "Wheelchair broken. Can't move. Need to get up." He signed, "Hurt?" She considered this honestly, which he appreciated. Then, "Elbow, maybe. Cold." He looked at the chair. The axle was cracked clean through on the left side. There was no fixing that on the sidewalk in January. He signed, "Chair is done. I need to carry you. Okay?" The fury came back, sharper this time. She signed, "I don't need to be carried." He looked at her. He looked at the pavement. He looked at the blood on her knuckles. He looked at the ice between her and anywhere she needed to go. He signed, "I know, but right now the ground is winning." She stared at him. He waited. She signed, slowly, like each word cost her something. "Don't drop me." He signed back, "I won't." He reached down and slid one arm behind her shoulders and the other beneath her knees, and he lifted her. She was lighter than he expected, and heavier than he expected at the same time. Lighter in body weight, heavier in the particular way of someone who was braced for every possible kind of letdown, and was very aware that they had just handed someone away to let them down again. She kept her face completely still. Her hands gripped his jacket. Not clinging, just gripping. Just the fingers finding purchase so she had something to hold. And she looked straight ahead over his shoulder as he straightened up and turned toward the cafe. Around them, people finally stopped. A woman paused mid-stride and watched. A man at the corner turned. 3 or 4 people slowed down, suddenly seeing what they had somehow not seen for the past several minutes. A woman on the ground, a broken chair. A story that had been happening in plain sight while everyone looked elsewhere. Ethan didn't look at any of them. He looked at the cafe door across the street, and he walked toward it. "Hey, mister!" a voice from behind him. He turned his head. A young guy, 20s, was picking up the broken wheelchair. "You want me to bring this?" Ethan nodded. "Please." He crossed the street. He pushed through the cafe door with his shoulder. The warmth inside hit them both at the same time. From the window table, Emma was on her feet, and Lily was standing on her chair, and both of them were staring at him with the particular expression of children whose father has just done something that is simultaneously alarming and completely characteristic. "Dad," Emma said, in a voice that was going for exasperated, but landing closer to impressed. "You carried a stranger in from the street." "Yeah," Ethan said. "Okay," Emma said. Cool. He carried Maya to the booth, the large one in the corner, the one he always requested because it fit all three of them, and lowered her carefully onto the bench seat. He kept one hand on her arm until she had her balance, until she gave a small, deliberate nod that said, I have it. And then he let go. She sat very straight. She kept her face arranged in the expression of someone who is perfectly fine and has everything under control. Her hands were shaking slightly. From cold, he told himself. Just from cold. Lily leaned forward across the table, elbows on the surface, chin in her hands, and stared at Maya with the open, unfiltered curiosity of an 8-year-old who has not yet learned that staring is rude. You are on the ground, Lily said. Did it hurt? Ethan opened his mouth to say Lily. Maya looked at Lily. Something in her face changed. The controlled arrangement of it softened, just at the edges, just enough to notice if you were paying attention. She raised her hand and made a small, rocking gesture. A little. Lily nodded seriously. I fell off the monkey bars last year, she said. It was really cold, too, because it was November. I cried. Maya looked at her. Then, and Ethan caught it, though it lasted barely a second. The corner of her mouth moved. Not a full smile, not anything close. Just a brief, involuntary acknowledgement that this small person had said something real. Dad, Emma said, dropping back into the seat across from Maya and folding her arms on the table with the air of someone who has decided to be fully present for the situation. She's using sign language. Do you speak sign language? A little, Ethan said. Can you teach me? Right now? I mean, how do you say hello? Ethan sat down and set his hands on the table and demonstrated. Hand open, fingers together, touch the forehead, bring the hand forward and out. Emma did it, badly, but recognizably. She looked at Maya and did it again. Maya looked at this 11-year-old across the table who had just attempted to greet her in her own language with the complete confidence of someone who does not yet know how to be awkward about things. And something happened in Maya's face that Ethan suspected didn't happen very often. She signed back, Hello, nice to meet you. And then she looked at Ethan. A direct, steady look. The look of someone taking stock of a situation. And he could almost see her thinking, calculating, deciding. She signed, Why did you help me? He thought about it for a second, because it felt like the kind of question that deserved an honest answer rather than a quick one. He signed, My girl saw you first. And I looked up. She waited, like she expected more. He spread his hands. That's it. She held his gaze for another moment. Then she looked down at her hands, the split knuckles, the dried blood, and something crossed her face that might have been embarrassment, or might have been something older and more complicated than that. Ethan stood up. He went to the counter and asked for a first aid kit, and the barista, a young woman named Grace, who had worked there long enough to know that Ethan Calloway's Tuesday mornings were never entirely uneventful, produced one without asking questions. He came back. He set it on the table and opened it and took out the antiseptic wipes. He signed, Can I? Maya looked at the kit, looked at him. Her jaw tightened briefly. That reflex again. That I don't need help reflex. The one that had probably kept her alive and functioning and absolutely alone for longer than it should have. Then she extended her hands. He cleaned them carefully. She didn't flinch, or rather, she flinched once on the first wipe, and then locked it down, and he pretended not to notice. He put small bandages across the worst of the splits and pressed them flat and let go. She pulled her hands back. She looked at them. She looked at him. Then she signed, Thank you. 2 words, quiet and precise. And behind them, he suspected, about 1,000 things she wasn't saying. "What's her name?" Lily asked, because Lily had been waiting patiently for approximately 90 seconds, and that was her limit. Ethan looked at Maya. He signed, "My daughter wants to know your name." Maya looked at Lily. She raised one hand and fingers spelled slowly enough that a child watching closely might follow it. M-A-Y-A. "Maya," Lily said immediately, with the satisfaction of someone who has successfully decoded something. "That's a really pretty name." Maya looked at her. That edge of her mouth moved again, that almost smile, the one that looked like it was surprising her as much as anyone. Outside, through the window, the young man who had picked up the broken wheelchair was standing on the sidewalk, uncertain, the chair in his hands. Ethan excused himself and stepped outside and thanked the man and brought the chair in and leaned it against the wall near the booth. When he sat back down, Emma was showing Maya something on her phone. A picture of the solar system, he realized. She was apparently making her case about Jupiter directly to a stranger, because Emma Collins, Ethan's daughter, thank you very much, had no concept of an inappropriate moment to discuss Jupiter's moons. Maya was looking at the phone with an expression that suggested she was following this entirely unexpected presentation about planetary science. She signed something to Ethan. He translated. "She says Jupiter does have a better story." Emma pointed at Maya. "See? The chair is not going to work," Ethan said then, because someone had to say it. He looked at the tilted, broken wheelchair against the wall. He looked at Maya. "The axle is cracked through. It needs parts at minimum, probably a full service." Maya's expression shifted, a calculation running behind her eyes, the kind of calculation that people who live close to the edge run constantly, totaling up options and costs and contingencies. She signed. Ethan translated aloud, mostly for himself. "I'll call the repair service. There's a number." "On a Tuesday morning in January," Ethan said carefully. "They're going to tell you tomorrow, maybe the day after." Maya looked at him. She knew that. He could tell from her face that she already knew that. He signed, "Where are you staying?" A long pause, long enough that he had his answer before she gave it. She signed, "Shelter on Wabash." He knew the one. He had done electrical work there 2 years ago. A decent enough place, run by people who cared, but tight. Always full in winter. He signed, "They have space?" Another pause. She looked at the wall beside the booth. Then she signed, "Last night they were full. I was going to try again." Ethan was quiet for a moment. He looked at his daughters, Emma, who was still talking to Maya about planets with complete unself-consciousness, and Lily, who had been watching Maya's hands with the intense focus of someone trying to learn a new language by pure observation. And he thought about what his life looked like from the outside, and what the right thing was, and whether those two things were the same. He signed, "I have a couch, and it's warm. Just tonight, until the chair is fixed." Maya looked at him for a long moment. Her face had gone very still again, that careful arrangement, that fortress. She signed, "You don't know me." He signed, "I know you hit that ground twice with your bare hands trying to get someone's attention. That's enough for me." Her throat moved. She looked away, out the window, at the street where she had lain on the ice while the world walked past her. She looked at her bandaged hands. She looked at Lily, who was drawing something on a napkin with a crayon she had produced from her coat pocket, because Lily always had a crayon, and who looked up at that moment and smiled at Maya with the uncomplicated warmth of a child who had already decided that this person was someone worth smiling at. Maya Collins, daughter of a CEO, woman who had survived everything the world had thrown at her by building walls so high and so thick that nothing good could get in alongside nothing bad. Maya Collins looked at that small, crayon-wielding 8-year-old, and the fortress cracked. Just a hairline, just a fracture, just enough. She looked back at Ethan. She signed, "Just tonight." He signed, "Just tonight." And something that neither of them had language for, not English, not ASL, not any language either of them had been taught, moved through the warm air of that cafe like the first breath after a long time underwater. The young barista named Grace refilled Ethan's coffee without being asked. Emma was explaining the great red spot. Lily was drawing something that looked, from where Ethan was sitting, like a wheelchair with wings. And Maya Collins, who had been invisible on the ice an hour ago, sat in a corner booth with her bandaged hands wrapped around a cup of hot tea that someone had placed in front of her without asking. And for the first time in longer than she could honestly remember, she was warm. The ride to Ethan's house was 20 minutes by car, and Maya spent most of it looking out the window with the particular stillness of someone who is paying very close attention to everything while pretending to pay attention to nothing. Ethan's truck was a gray Ford F-150 that had seen better days and didn't apologize for it. There were crayon marks on the back of the passenger seat, a library book on the floor that was 3 weeks overdue, a small stuffed rabbit wedged into the cup holder that belonged, Ethan had explained with a straight face while buckling Lily in, to no one in particular, and absolutely not to him. Lily had immediately contradicted this by saying, "That's Gerald. He comes everywhere." Maya had looked at the rabbit, then at Lily. Then she had turned back to the window, and that hairline fracture in her expression had widened by about 1 millimeter. Emma sat in the back beside her sister and spent the first 5 minutes trying to teach herself the ASL alphabet from a video on her phone, occasionally holding her hand up in Maya's peripheral vision to see if she was getting it right. Maya, without fully turning from the window, had twice reached over and adjusted Emma's fingers into the correct position. The letter D on the first correction, the letter G on the second, and then returned to looking out at the street. Emma had stared at her own corrected hand like it had done something remarkable. Ethan watched all of this in the rearview mirror and said nothing, because some things he didn't interrupt. His house was a 2-story brick row house in Wicker Park. Narrow, a little crowded, aggressively lived in. He had bought it with his wife 11 years ago, when Wicker Park was still the kind of neighborhood where you bought a house because you could afford it, not because it was fashionable. The neighborhood had gotten fashionable. The house had gotten more lived in. These two facts had never quite reconciled themselves. He pulled into the narrow driveway and cut the engine and got out and came around to the passenger side. He had borrowed a manual transport wheelchair from the cafe. Grace had produced it from the back room with the air of someone who has anticipated most emergencies. And he set it up beside the truck and opened the door. Maya looked at the transport chair. Her face did something. He signed, "I know, it's not yours. Just until we get yours fixed." She signed back, and the sign she used was clipped and precise. "It's a medical rental chair. It has a sticker from a hospital. I'm not a patient." He looked at the sticker. It did, in fact, say Mercy General Medical Center on it. He said, "Would you rather I carry you again?" She looked at him. He kept his face entirely neutral. She signed, "Get the chair." He got the chair. Getting her from the truck into the chair and then up the 2 front steps of the house was a process that required the combined logistical effort of all 3 of them. Emma holding the door, Lily moving Gerald the rabbit inside first because she felt he should be there to greet their guest, and Ethan and Maya working out a system of transfer that respected her clear preference for doing as much of it herself as possible. She was strong. Her arms were genuinely strong in the way that arms become when they've been doing the work of 4 limbs for 7 years. She made it clear, without words, that she was aware of exactly what her body could do and exactly how much help she was willing to accept, and that the line between those two things was hers to draw. He respected that. He let her draw it. Inside, the house was warm in a way that was slightly chaotic and entirely real. There was a coat rack by the door that was holding more coats than a rack that size should reasonably hold. There were shoes in a line that had started as an organized system and evolved into something more democratic. On the living room wall, there were children's drawings in frames, next to an unframed print of a jazz club in New Orleans that Ethan had bought at a street fair 7 years ago and always meant to frame and hadn't. There was a piano. It was against the far wall of the living room, an upright Yamaha, dark wood, slightly battered around the lower corners, where years of small feet and toy cars and various childhood impacts had left their marks. But the keys were clean. The fallboard was up. There was sheet music on the stand. Maya stopped. She stopped so completely and suddenly that Ethan nearly walked into the back of the transport chair. He caught himself and stood still and followed her sightline to the piano, and he said nothing, because there was clearly something happening that he didn't fully understand yet. After a long moment, she signed, "Who plays?" He signed, "Nobody anymore." "My wife played. She left the piano." She looked at him, a question in her face that she didn't ask. He signed, "She left a lot of things, kept the things she needed more." Maya looked at the piano for another moment. Then she moved forward, wheeling herself the rest of the way to it. She reached out and pressed one key, middle C, and held it down until the note faded completely. She pressed another, a fifth above, then a third. Her hands moved without urgency, like they were remembering something. Lily had come to stand beside her.
"Can you play?"
Lily asked. Maya looked at her. She signed something, slowly, so Lily could try to follow, and then looked at Ethan. He translated. "She says she used to."
"Will you play now?"
Lily asked. Maya's hands rested on the keys without pressing them. She seemed to weigh something. Then she shook her head. Not a sharp no like before, but something softer. Not yet. Lily accepted this with the practicality of a child who understands that not yet is different from no, and moved on to the more immediately pressing matter of showing Maya her bedroom, which she had already decided Maya was going to sleep in, a decision she had not yet shared with her father. "Lily," Ethan said, tracking this development, "Maya is going to sleep on the—" "My room has better blankets," Lily said, with complete authority. "You're 8. You have a Bluey comforter."
"Bluey is very warm and also very friendly."
Maya was watching this exchange with her head turned slightly to one side, tracking the movement of their mouths, following the shape of the conversation. She signed something brief. Ethan looked at her. She signed it again, more deliberately. She was signing, "I don't mind the couch." "See?" Ethan said. "She's being polite," Lily said, in the patient tone of someone explaining something obvious. "We should give her the real room." "It has Bluey on the blanket." "Bluey," Lily said firmly, "is a classic." Maya pressed her lips together, not smiling, but working not to. They settled on Emma's room, because Emma, when consulted, shrugged and said she'd sleep in a sleeping bag in Lily's room, which was presented as a spontaneous act of generosity, but which Ethan suspected had been negotiated between the sisters in the truck when he wasn't listening. He put fresh sheets on Emma's bed, while Emma gave Maya a tour of the upstairs bathroom with the thoroughness of a real estate agent, explaining the quirks of the hot water handle and the location of the extra toothbrushes, and the fact that the third drawer stuck, but you had to push down on the left side while pulling. a technique she described with the confidence of someone who has mastered a difficult skill. Maya listened to all of this, watched Emma's mouth, caught what she could, asked Ethan to translate the parts that moved too fast. She did it without embarrassment, which surprised Ethan somehow. Not demanding, not apologetic, just practical. I need this information, give it to me. The same way she had given him her hands to bandage, not because she was fragile, but because the situation required it, and she had decided to allow it. He was beginning to understand that allowing things was not something Maya Collins did lightly, or often, or without keeping a very close eye on the door. Dinner was pasta, because Tuesday was pasta in the Calloway house, and had been for 3 years running. And Ethan was not going to change the rotation just because they had a guest. Partly because he didn't have anything else defrosted, and partly because he had a theory that the best thing you could offer someone who had been existing outside the structure of normal life was the particular comfort of someone else's normal routine. He was less sure about this theory by the time he was standing at the stove, stirring sauce, and Lily was sitting at the kitchen table, teaching Maya to write her name in ASL on a piece of notebook paper, one letter at a time, with total pedagogical seriousness. "No, like this," Lily said, taking Maya's hand and shaping the fingers. "Like you're holding a little ball. See?" Maya looked at her hand, shaped by an 8-year-old's patient fingers, and something passed through her face that moved quickly enough that Ethan almost missed it. Something that looked, for just a second, like grief. The quiet, private kind. The kind that has been lived with long enough that it mostly stays below the surface and only comes up when something catches you off guard. He stirred the sauce and didn't say anything. Emma came in and sat across from Lily and opened her homework. She lasted approximately 4 minutes before she said, without looking up from her worksheet, "Maya, were you born deaf, or did it happen?" "Emma," Ethan said. "What? It's a real question." He looked at Maya. She had been watching Emma's mouth. She signed something to Ethan. He translated, slowly. "She says it's okay. She says it happened. An accident, when she was 19. "Does it hurt?" Lily asked. Maya shook her head. "Do you miss hearing things?" Maya paused. Then she signed, and Ethan translated. "She says she misses music, the way it felt when she could hear it." Lily thought about this very seriously. "We have a piano," she said finally. "She saw it," Emma said, without looking up. "Maybe she could—" "Lily." Emma had the particular tone of an older sister who is heading off a direction she has decided is too much, too fast. "Let her eat first." Maya looked at Emma. Emma was still looking at her worksheet, pencil moving. But she had said it. Let her eat first, with a matter-of-factness that assumed Maya would eat, assumed Maya would stay, assumed a future that was at least long enough for a meal. And something in that assumption, the ordinary, unforced nature of it, did something to Maya that all of Ethan's careful consideration had not quite done. She looked down at the table. Ethan put a bowl in front of her. She looked up. He signed, "Eat, you're allowed." She looked at him for just a moment too long. Then she picked up the fork. They ate. Emma complained about the worksheet. Lily fed Gerald the rabbit a single piece of rigatoni with great ceremony. Ethan poured juice and forgot to pour his own, and Emma poured it for him without being asked, which was something she had started doing at some point in the last year, and which still, every time, got him somewhere in the chest. Maya ate slowly, like she was paying attention to the food in a way that people do when they haven't been eating regularly. She didn't eat everything, which he noticed, and which also told him something. When dinner was cleared and the girls were in the living room arguing companionably about what to watch, Ethan sat across from Maya at the kitchen table, with his hands wrapped around his coffee mug, and looked at her. She looked back. He signed, "Are you okay?" She signed, "You keep asking that." He signed, "You keep giving me reasons to." She looked at the table, then up. She signed, "The wheelchair repair service said Wednesday, earliest." He nodded. He had expected that. She signed, "I can't stay here until Wednesday." He signed, "Why?" A beat. She signed, "Because I don't do this." He signed, "What, eat pasta?" She gave him a look. Not quite the furious look from the sidewalk, but related to it. The look of someone who knows they're being managed and is deciding whether to allow it. She signed, "I don't take things from people I don't know." He signed, "Even when you need them?" She signed, "Especially then." He sat back. He thought about that for a moment, about what it meant to build a life on not needing anyone, about how much discipline and pain that required, about the fact that she had been lying on an icy sidewalk for God knows how long before he looked up. He signed, "Can I ask you something?" She waited. He signed, "What would have happened if I hadn't looked up?" She was very still. Then she signed, "I would have figured something out." He signed, "Would you?" She signed, "I always do." He believed her. He believed it completely. That she had always figured it out. That she had developed over 7 years an absolute and load-bearing conviction that she would figure it out, because the alternative was admitting that she couldn't. And that was not something she was able to afford. He believed it, and it broke his heart a little, and he didn't say any of that. He signed, "The couch is there. The room is there. Wednesday is Wednesday. What does it cost you to stay?" She looked at him. He watched her work through it. The calculation he'd seen running behind her eyes since the cafe. The same one she'd been running for 7 years, probably. What does it cost? What do I owe? What does this mean? What happens when it ends? She signed, "What do you want from me?" He met her eyes. He signed, "Nothing." She signed, "People always want something." He signed, "I know, but I don't. And I realize you have no reason to believe that. I'm just telling you." She looked at him for a long moment. The kitchen was quiet. From the living room came the sound of the television and Lily's voice narrating something to Gerald. Maya's hands moved. Slowly. "My father used to say things like that." He signed, "What happened?" A very long pause. She signed, "He wanted me to be something. And when I couldn't be it anymore, he decided I wasn't worth keeping." Ethan was quiet. The coffee in his mug had gone cold. He didn't reach for it. He signed, "I'm not him." She signed, "I know. I just—" She stopped, started again. "I don't know you." He signed, "No, that's fair." She signed, "You have daughters. This is their home. You should be careful what you bring into it." He signed, "Yeah." He looked toward the living room. "They already know you're here. That ship sailed when Lily named you a member of the household approximately 40 minutes ago." The corner of Maya's mouth moved. He was starting to be able to read that movement, the particular way it happened when something caught her genuinely, when her defenses were too occupied elsewhere to stop it. She signed, "She's a lot." He signed, "She is the most a person has ever been." The almost smile lasted a full second this time. Then she signed, "Wednesday." He signed, "Wednesday." She nodded once. It wasn't surrender. It wasn't even quite agreement. It was something more like a ceasefire, a temporary conditional laying down of arms that both of them understood could be picked back up at any moment. He took it. He pushed back from the table and went to do the dishes, and after a moment he heard the sound of the wheels of the transport chair moving across the kitchen floor. And then there were hands next to his at the sink. Maya, who had rolled up beside him and was picking up the rinsed bowls and stacking them on the drying rack, with the practical efficiency of someone who does not believe in sitting still when there is work to be done. He looked at her. She looked at the dishes. Her expression said clearly, "I am a guest, not an invalid, and if you say one word about this, I will throw a bowl at you." He turned back to the sink. They did the dishes in silence, which was not uncomfortable. Later, after the girls were in bed, a process that involved 2 glasses of water, one discovered lost sock, and a prolonged negotiation with Lily about whether Gerald needed to be tucked in separately, Ethan sat on the couch in the dim living room and stared at the ceiling for a while. He thought about his ex-wife, which he tried not to do, and did anyway. He thought about the night she told him she was leaving. Not angry, not dramatic, just exhausted. "I don't think we're the same people anymore, Ethan." He had wanted to argue. He had not been able to. He thought about the way the girls had handled it, which is to say, they had handled it the way children handle impossible things, by absorbing it into their bones and growing around it, becoming slightly different shapes than they would have been. He thought about Maya Collins lying on the ice while people stepped over her legs. He thought, what does it do to a person to be that invisible, to need something that badly, and watch the world decide it's not their problem? He already knew part of the answer to that. He had seen it in his daughters. The way Emma, who had watched her mother leave, now sometimes checked exits before she got comfortable anywhere. The way Lily loved everything immediately and completely because someone had taught her, without meaning to, that things could disappear without warning. He didn't know what had taught Maya, but he could see the shape of the lesson in the architecture of the way she held herself. He got up. He went to the kitchen and got a glass of water, and stood in the doorway of the living room for a moment, looking at the piano. The sheet music on the stand was something he'd put there years ago and never taken down. A Chopin nocturne that his wife had been working on when everything fell apart. He should have taken it down. He'd left it there so long he'd stopped seeing it. He thought about Maya pressing middle C in the careful, remembering way she had. He crossed the room and took the sheet music off the stand and put it in the piano bench and closed the lid. Then he went upstairs. The door to Emma's room, Maya's room for tonight, for however many nights, for Wednesday at least, had a strip of light under it. He stood outside it for a moment, not knocking. Then he heard it. Very faint, muffled by the door. A sound that took him a moment to identify because it was so controlled, so deliberately quiet. The kind of sound a person makes when they are absolutely certain no one can hear them, and they are allowing themselves, for just a few minutes, to be something other than completely fine. He stood outside the door. He did not knock. He stood there until the sound stopped, and then he stood there a little longer, and then he went to bed. He lay in the dark and looked at the ceiling and thought, she hit the ground with her bare hands, twice, just to make someone look at her. He thought, I looked up. He thought, I don't know if that's enough, but it's what I've got. He closed his eyes. Downstairs, the house was quiet. The piano was dark. The transport chair was folded by the front door, and in the room at the end of the hall, Maya Collins, who had survived everything life had thrown at her by becoming a fortress, lay in Emma Calloway's bed, under a comforter covered in cartoon dogs, in a house she had been in for 4 hours, in a life that was not hers, and breathed. Just breathed. For the first time in a long time, that felt like enough. She was already awake when the house started moving. Maya had not slept past 5:30 in 7 years. Not since the hospital. Not since the accident rewired not just her body, but her internal clock into something that treated rest as a liability. Old habits from a life that no longer existed. She lay still in Emma's bed and listened to the silence, the way she had trained herself to listen to things she couldn't hear. Through the soles of her feet, through the vibration of the mattress, through the particular quality of light coming under the door. The house came alive in stages. First, a thump from upstairs. Lily, she guessed, landing on the floor with both feet the way children do when they are physically incapable of easing into a morning. Then the particular tremor of small feet running down a hallway. Then nothing for a while. Then the faint shudder through the walls that meant someone was in the kitchen. Water running, cabinet doors, the low rhythmic vibration that she had figured out, around 2 in the morning when she couldn't sleep, was the coffee maker cycling on. She sat up. She looked around Emma's room in the gray January morning light. The posters on the wall, the stack of library books on the desk, the globe with a crack in it near Greenland, the photograph on the nightstand of Ethan and his daughters at what looked like a state fair, all 3 of them holding corn dogs and squinting into summer sun. Emma was maybe 9 in the picture. Lily was a baby, basically, perched on Ethan's hip with the expression of someone who has just discovered that the world is full of noise and light, and she intends to investigate all of it. Maya looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then she pushed herself upright and reached for the transport chair. She found Lily in the kitchen. Lily was standing on a step stool at the counter, very seriously making toast, with the focused expression of someone performing surgery. She was still in her pajamas, blue ones with small yellow stars, and her hair was an architectural disaster, and she had Gerald tucked under one arm, which made the toast operation significantly more complicated, but apparently non-negotiable. She looked up when Maya rolled in. She said, "I'm making toast. Do you want toast?" Maya looked at her. She held up 2 fingers. 2 pieces, Lily confirmed, nodding like this was a business transaction. "Do you want butter or peanut butter?" Maya touched the side of her hand to her chin and brought it forward. Lily watched the sign. She said, very carefully, mimicking the gesture, "Is that peanut butter?" Maya shook her head and signed it more slowly. Lily tried again. Still wrong, but closer. Maya reached over and adjusted her finger slightly, then signed it one more time. "Oh," Lily said, "that's butter. Okay, what about peanut butter?" She looked at her own hands like they might tell her. "I don't know peanut butter yet." Maya raised one finger, one thing at a time, and the corner of her mouth moved. Lily put the toast down and said, with great seriousness, "I'm going to learn all of it. Emma already knows like 6 letters. I know 4, but I know the important ones." Maya raised an eyebrow. "What are the important ones?" "Hello," Lily said, and did it. The correct gesture, touching her forehead and bringing her hand out. "And thank you." "And I don't know this one yet, but I want to know how to say..." She paused. "How do you say good morning?" Maya showed her, slowly, twice. Lily practiced it 3 times, lips pressed together in concentration. Then she turned to Maya and performed it with great ceremony. "Good morning." Maya looked at this 8-year-old in star pajamas with a stuffed rabbit under her arm, who had woken up early to make toast and was using her first waking minutes to learn a language because a stranger was in her house. And she signed back, "Good morning." Lily beamed like she had won something. Ethan appeared in the doorway in a gray sweatshirt and the expression of a man who was not yet fully operational. He looked at Lily on the step stool. He looked at Maya at the kitchen table. He said, "Why are you both awake?" "I'm making toast," Lily said. "It's 6:15. Toast doesn't care what time it is. He looked at Maya. He signed lopsidedly. Good morning. Sleep okay? She signed back. Fine. Then, after a pause, your coffee maker is loud. He looked at the coffee maker. He signed, I know. It's been like that for a year. I keep meaning to fix it. She signed, You do electrical work. You can't fix a coffee maker? He said, out loud because his signing was slow in the morning, I fix other people's electrical problems. Mine, I live with. She looked at him. Something in her expression said she understood that this applied to more than the coffee maker. He poured himself a cup and sat across from her, and they sat in the kitchen while Lily finished the toast with great ceremony and distributed it, and then climbed onto the chair beside Maya and began the serious business of eating her own piece, while simultaneously trying to teach Gerald to wave. Emma came down at 7, already dressed, backpack on, with the energy of someone who has been running at full speed since before the alarm went off. She looked at the scene in the kitchen, her father with his coffee, Lily with her rabbit, Maya with her toast, and said, We should go. We're going to be late. And then, without breaking stride, placed a piece of paper on the table in front of Maya. That's the ASL alphabet. I printed it last night. You can keep it. Maya looked at the paper. It was printed from a website, the hand positions for each letter arranged in a grid. Emma had highlighted a few of them in yellow and written small notes in the margins. This one looks like an A if you think about it sideways. Next to the letter G. My dad does this one wrong. Maya turned the paper over. On the back, Emma had written, in the particular careful handwriting of a child who is trying to be adult about something, In case you want to teach us more, we want to learn. Maya sat with the paper in her hands for a moment. Emma was already at the door. Dad, seriously, late. He stood up. He looked at Maya. He signed, I'll be back in 30 minutes. You're okay here? She signed, Go. He signed, There's more bread, and there's soup in the fridge from last night. He paused. He signed, Make yourself at home. I mean that. She looked at him. She didn't sign anything. But she nodded. A real nod this time, not the guarded minimal one from the day before. Something with more weight to it. He went. The house without them was a different animal. It wasn't empty. It was too full of their traces to be empty. Too saturated with the particular energy of 3 people who lived loudly and warmly and without much reserve. But it was quiet, and quiet was something Maya knew how to be in. She finished her toast. She rinsed her plate. She sat at the kitchen table for a while and looked at Emma's printed alphabet page. Then she wheeled herself to the living room, to the piano. She sat in front of it for a long time. She didn't open the fall board. She just sat there, with her hands in her lap, looking at the dark wood of it. She had started playing piano at 5. By 12, she was working through Chopin. By 17, she had been accepted to the Chicago Conservatory's youth program, which was the first thing in her life that had been entirely hers. Not her father's money, not his name, not his expectation. Just her hands and the music, and the particular private joy of something you are genuinely, irreducibly good at. At 19, a drunk driver had run a red light at 4 in the morning and taken her legs and her hearing in the span of about 3 seconds. She had not played since. Not because her hands didn't work. Her hands worked fine. Not because she couldn't read music. She could read it. She could feel the rhythm of it through her fingers and through the vibration of the instrument. But because music had lived in her ears, and without her ears, it felt like trying to remember someone's face from a photograph after you've lost the original. Technically, the information was there, but the thing itself was gone, and trying to reach it just reminded you of what was missing. She opened the fallboard. The keys were clean. Someone, Ethan she guessed, recently, had wiped them down. She could see where the old yellowing had been cleaned away. She placed her hands on the keys, middle C under her right thumb. She could feel the smoothness of the ivory. She could feel the give of it, that particular resistance, the weight of it that she had calibrated her whole childhood. She pressed middle C. She felt it more than heard it. A vibration through the keys, through the wood of the instrument, through her palms and into her arms. Not nothing. Not the full thing, but not nothing. She played the C major scale, slowly, each note a small vibration against her skin. She stopped. She sat still. She pressed her palms flat against the keys without pressing them down, just feeling the shape of them, the geography of an instrument that had been her whole language once. Then she played a chord, C major, first position. She held it. The vibration moved through the piano bench, up through her body, into her chest. She took a breath. She started to play. Not the Chopin. She wasn't ready for that. Wasn't sure she'd ever be ready for that. That music belonged to a version of herself she wasn't sure existed anymore. She played something simpler, something she'd learned at 9 years old and still had in her hands like a reflex. A Satie gymnopédie, slow and open, the notes spaced out with long silences between them. She had always loved it for the silences. They had always felt deliberate, like the music was breathing. She played it through once, then again. Her eyes closed. She wasn't hearing it, not really, but she was feeling it. The vibration of each note resonating through the wood and the bench and her body, and the muscle memory of it, the way her hands knew where to go the way they know nothing else. She was on her third pass through when she stopped because she felt the floor vibrate differently. Footsteps, heavier than the girls. Ethan was in the doorway. He had been home, she realized. She hadn't heard the door, for long enough to take his coat off. He was standing very still, watching her, and his expression was the careful kind. The kind of face you make when you don't want to do anything that will make someone stop doing what they're doing. She lifted her hands from the keys. He signed, "Don't stop." She looked at him. He signed again, more slowly, "Please don't stop." She looked at the piano. She signed, "I can't hear it." He signed, "I can. Keep going." She looked at him for a moment. Something complicated moved through her face. Then she turned back to the piano and placed her hands on the keys and played. He sat down on the couch behind her, out of her immediate sightline, and she played the Satie through twice more, slowly, deliberately, feeling her way through each measure the way you feel your way through a familiar room in the dark. Not perfect, not what it had been, but there. When she stopped the second time, she kept her hands on the keys and stared at the fallboard. He came and sat in the chair beside the piano. He signed, "How long since you've played?" She signed, 7 years. He signed, "It doesn't sound like it." She signed, "You're being kind." He signed, "I'm being accurate. There's a difference." She looked at him. She signed, "My father paid for lessons until I was 18. After the accident, he said..." She paused, choosing the sign carefully. "He said the music part was done. He said I should focus on other things I could still actually do." Ethan was very still. He signed, "He said that." She signed, word for word. He signed, "He was wrong." She looked at the keys. She signed, "He was practical, There's a difference. He said out loud, slowly and clearly enough that she could read it. No, there isn't. Not about that. She kept her eyes on the piano. Her hands were still resting on the keys. She signed, "He runs Collins Capital. He has 1,500 employees. He gave to every charity in Chicago and has a building at Northwestern with his name on it. He is the kind of man that people write nice things about." He signed, "And he told his daughter that the thing she loved was done." She didn't sign anything to that. He signed, "Is that why you were on the street?" Another silence. Longer. He waited. She signed, "He cut me off 8 months ago. He said—" She stopped. Resumed. "He said I had become a liability, that I had made choices that reflected badly on the family, that he needed to distance himself." He signed, "What choices?" She signed, "I talked to a journalist about his company's accessibility practices. His buildings, he owns 12 commercial properties in Chicago. None of them are fully compliant. His HR department has a history of—" She paused again. "I tried to make him do better, and he decided that I was trying to destroy him." Ethan sat back in the chair. He looked at her, this woman who had been on the ice yesterday morning with bleeding hands and a broken chair. And he felt something that he hadn't felt since the night his daughters were born. A feeling that sat right at the edge of rage and right at the edge of something much softer. He signed, "So he cut you off. His own daughter." She signed, "I was an inconvenience before. Then I became a threat." He signed, "And you've been on your own since." She signed, "I have a small disability payment. Enough for food. Not enough for rent in Chicago. The shelter program is—" She spread her hands in a gesture he understood. "Functional, but limited." He signed, "How long have you been in the shelter system?" She looked at him steadily. She signed, 6 months. He held her gaze. He thought about the piano and what it had cost her to sit down at it. He thought about the journalist and the story she had tried to tell. He thought about the building on Northwestern's campus with her father's name on it. He signed, "You weren't trying to destroy him. You were trying to make him be responsible." She signed, "Yes." He signed, "And it cost you everything." She signed very quietly, the signs small and deliberate. "I would do it again." He believed her. Without question, without hesitation, he believed her completely. He said out loud, "Then your father is an idiot." She read his lips. The corner of her mouth moved. She signed, "He has a building named after him." He said, "Idiots can have buildings named after them. Happens all the time." This time, the corner of her mouth moved more. Not the almost smile she'd been managing since yesterday. Something closer to the real thing. He signed, "I want to ask you something, and I need you to tell me the truth." She waited. He signed, "Where were you planning to go yesterday, after the shelter was full?" She didn't sign anything for a moment. She looked at the piano. Then, "There's a 24-hour diner on Wabash. The night manager doesn't say anything if you sit in a booth, as long as you order coffee every few hours." He said, "Maya." She signed, "It's fine. I've done it before." He said, "That's not fine. That's not—" He stopped. He ran a hand over his face. He signed more slowly, "That's not what you deserve." She signed, "You don't know what I deserve." He signed, "No, but I know what you don't." She looked at him. He looked back. Neither of them looked away. The front door opened. Both of them registered the shudder of it, and Lily's voice carried through the house before she was fully inside.
Maya, I learned 2 more letters, G and H. Emma tested me.
Both of them looked toward the hallway, then back at each other. Maya signed quickly. We don't tell them. About the shelter. About my father. None of it. He signed, That's your call, not mine. She signed, I mean it. He signed, I heard you. Lily appeared in the doorway, still in her coat, backpack hanging off one shoulder, holding up both hands with her fingers arranged into what was almost, but not quite, the letter G.
Am I doing it right?
Maya turned in the transport chair to face her. She looked at Lily's hands. She reached over and made one small adjustment to the finger position. Lily looked at her corrected hand.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's better.
She looked at Ethan.
Dad, Maya was playing the piano.
I know, he said. I heard it from outside. It was really pretty. Maya was watching Lily's mouth. She had caught enough of it, piano, pretty, to understand the shape of it. Lily looked at Maya. Will you teach me? Maya looked at her, then at the piano, then back at Lily. She signed, You want to learn piano? I want to learn everything, Lily said, with complete sincerity. Emma appeared behind her sister in the doorway, pushing past her into the room. She told everyone at school her hands talk now, Emma announced. She signed hello to her teacher. Her teacher said hello back, Lily said defensively. Her teacher was confused. She was impressed. Ethan looked at his daughters. He looked at Maya. Maya was watching them with that expression again, the one that lived on the border between warmth and pain, the one that happened when something was getting past the walls before she could stop it. He signed to her, small and private, while the girls argued. You can teach her, if you want. She watched his hands. Then she looked at Lily, at this 8-year-old who had already decided that Maya was worth knowing, worth learning for, worth rearranging her mourning for. And she signed back, just 2 signs, just barely. Maybe. Yes. He stood up. He said, Coat off, Lily. Snack. Homework. I don't have homework. Then practice your letters. That's basically homework. That's enrichment. What's the difference? $15 an hour and a sense of purpose. Lily considered this with deep skepticism, and then took off her coat. Maya sat by the piano while the afternoon reorganized itself around her. Emma at the kitchen table with her worksheet. Lily practicing the ASL alphabet on the couch with the printed sheet Emma had given Maya. Ethan on the phone in the hallway, dealing with what sounded like a scheduling problem with one of his contractors. The ordinary machinery of a household, running on its ordinary tracks. She sat in the middle of it and felt the particular disorientation of someone who has been outside in the cold for so long that the warmth of a room feels almost suspicious, like it might not be real, like it might be taken away. She put her hands back on the piano keys. She didn't play anything. She just rested them there, feeling the cool, smooth ivory under her palms, feeling the solidity of it. This thing that had been sitting in this room with its music unplayed for years, waiting, as things sometimes do, for the right moment. She pressed one key, held it, felt the vibration fade. Then she heard, felt, footsteps beside her. Small ones. Lily had climbed onto the piano bench beside the transport chair. She sat with her hands in her lap, watching Maya's hands on the keys. She didn't say anything. She just sat there, close enough that Maya could feel the warmth of her through the air between them, which in January in Chicago was not nothing. Maya looked at her. Lily looked up. She signed hello, the right sign, correctly placed. and then grinned with the total, uncomplicated joy of someone who has learned a thing and gets to use it. Maya looked at this child, who had learned to say hello in her language because a stranger needed somewhere to sleep. She took Lily's right hand. She shaped the small fingers carefully into position over middle C. She signed with her other hand, press. Lily pressed. The note rang out, imperfect, a little heavy-fingered, and Lily's whole face changed. Like she hadn't expected it to be that real. Like she hadn't expected to press a key and have it actually mean something. She looked at Maya. She signed, incorrectly but unmistakably, the sign for again. Maya corrected the sign, then nodded. Lily pressed again, and in the kitchen doorway, Ethan Calloway stood with his phone lowered and his scheduling problem forgotten, watching his youngest daughter play one note on a piano they hadn't touched in 3 years, guided by the hands of a woman who had been invisible on the ice 24 hours ago. And he thought, something is happening here. He didn't know what to call it yet. He wasn't sure it needed a name. He just knew that he was not going to let it be taken away. Wednesday came and went. Not because the wheelchair repair service failed to show up. They showed up, right on schedule. A heavy-set man named Don, who spent 40 minutes in the entryway with a broken chair, and then stood up and told Ethan that the axle assembly needed to be ordered from the manufacturer, and that the motor housing had cracked in 2 places, and that realistically they were looking at 7 to 10 business days, not 2. Maya had been in the kitchen when Don said it. She had watched Ethan's face while Don talked, reading the situation from the shift in his expression before Ethan even turned to sign it to her. She had already known. The way you know things when you've been reading the world without sound for 7 years. The way Don shook his head. The way he held the broken piece up. The particular angle of his shoulders that said, "This is more than I can fix today." She had sat very still while Ethan signed it to her. Then she had signed, "I'll call the shelter." And Ethan had signed back immediately, without hesitation, "No." She had looked at him. He had looked back. Neither of them had said anything else. Because there was a version of this conversation that ended in her leaving, and a version that ended in her staying, and they had both understood, without spelling it out, which version was real. She had put the phone down. That had been 5 days ago. 5 days in which the Calloway house had reorganized itself around her presence, the way houses do around people who stay. Quietly, incrementally, without anyone making a formal announcement. The corner of the living room near the piano had become Maya's corner. There was a small table there now, moved from the hallway, where she kept the things she'd retrieved from the shelter storage with Ethan's help. A laptop with a cracked hinge, a folder of documents, a photograph that she kept face down and that nobody asked about. The transport chair had been replaced on day 3 by a rental that was closer to her own. Lighter, more responsive, something she could actually move through the world in rather than be moved through it. Lily had claimed the piano bench as shared territory. Every afternoon after school, she climbed up beside Maya's chair and they worked through the same 5 notes they'd been working through since Tuesday. Lily's small fingers finding the keys with increasing confidence, Maya's hand guiding and correcting, and occasionally, when Lily hit a note cleanly and held it the right length, giving one firm approving nod that Lily had decided was the highest available form of praise and pursued accordingly. Emma had not climbed on the piano bench. Emma was not a piano bench kind of person. But she had started leaving things on the small table in Maya's corner. A book about Beethoven she'd taken from the school library. A printed article about deaf musicians that she placed there without comment and walked away from, as if she hadn't done it. Maya had read both. She had not said anything to Emma about it. But the next morning, Emma had found, on top of her backpack, a folded piece of paper on which Maya had written out the ASL signs for every planet in the solar system, including a note at the bottom that said, "Jupiter, yes, your father told me about the argument." Emma had read it 3 times. She had put it in her backpack and gone to school and not mentioned it, which was how Emma Calloway handled things that mattered to her very much. Ethan had watched all of this with the particular attention of a man who is trying to understand something that is happening faster than he can track it. His house felt different. Not disrupted. Different. Fuller, somehow, in a way that had nothing to do with the extra chair, or the table in the corner, or the laptop with the cracked hinge. It felt the way a room feels when you turn on a lamp that's been off for a long time. Like the light was always available. Like someone just finally reached for the switch. He was thinking about this on Saturday morning, standing at the kitchen counter making coffee, when his phone rang. He looked at the screen. A number he didn't recognize. Chicago area code, but not a contact. He picked up. "Mr. Calloway." The voice was smooth, professional, and had the particular texture of someone who is accustomed to being listened to. "My name is Richard Collins. I believe you have my daughter." Ethan's hand tightened on the phone. He said, "I don't have anyone. Maya is staying here because her wheelchair broke down, and she needed somewhere safe." "Of course," Richard Collins said, in the tone of a man who has already decided that whatever you're saying is a version of something he's already accounted for. "I appreciate your generosity. However, Maya has some complex needs that I'm not sure you fully understand. And I think it would be best if—" "How did you get this number?" Ethan said. A brief pause. Maya's caseworker filed a change of address notification as a matter of procedure. Her disability payment is linked to a social services file. It's all standard process. "Okay," Ethan said. "And you had access to that file?" "I have been concerned about Maya's well-being for some time. I've stayed in contact with her support network to make sure she's—" "Her support network," Ethan said. "You mean the shelter system you allowed your daughter to end up in?" The smoothness in Richard Collins's voice developed a very slight edge. "That's a complicated situation that I don't expect you to fully understand from the outside, Mr. Calloway." "No," Ethan said. "It's actually pretty simple from where I'm standing." "I'm calling," Richard Collins said, with the deliberate patience of someone resetting a negotiation, "because I'd like to see Maya. I'd like to make sure she's all right, and discuss some options for her care going forward. I'd appreciate it if you'd facilitate that." "You'd appreciate it," Ethan said. "Yes." "Then I'd appreciate it," Ethan said, "if you'd call Maya directly. She's an adult. I'm not her guardian. You want to talk to her, you talk to her." Another pause. Longer this time. "I see," Richard Collins said. "Good," Ethan said. "Have a good morning." He hung up. He stood at the counter for a moment, the phone still in his hand, the coffee untouched. Then he went to the living room, where Maya was at the piano, not playing, reading something on her laptop, but sitting there because it had become the place she sat. She looked up when he came in. She read his face immediately. She signed, "What happened?" He signed, "Your father called." She went very still. Not surprised, not quite, but something tightened in her face that he hadn't seen in days. A lock clicking back into place. She signed, "What did he say?" He signed, "He wants to see you. He said he wants to discuss options for your care." The lock didn't click tighter. It did something else. Something that moved through her jaw and her eyes and the set of her shoulders. Something that looked like old pain, identifying itself by name. She signed, He found me. He signed, he said it was through your social services file. Change of address notification. She signed, of course. She looked at the laptop, then at her hands, then at him. He does this. He waits until I'm somewhere stable, and then he reminds me that I'm not. Ethan sat down on the couch across from her. He signed, what does he want, really? She signed, control. She paused. He doesn't want me back. He wants to be the one who decides where I am. He's been watching the story I gave to the journalist. The paper is going to publish it. He knows if I'm on the street or in a shelter, it looks bad for him. Worse than it already does. He wants me somewhere he can manage. A facility, probably. Something residential. Somewhere quiet. Ethan signed, he wants to put you somewhere. She signed, he's been trying to get me declared incapacitated for 2 years. He has a lawyer who files motions. I have a legal aid attorney who blocks them. So far, I've blocked them all. But if he can establish that I'm living in unstable conditions, that I have no fixed address, that my judgment is compromised. She stopped. Her hands were completely steady. Her face was very controlled. It gives him more to work with. Ethan was quiet for a moment. He signed, how close is the article to publishing? She signed, the journalist said next week, maybe 10 days. If it runs, it changes the math. His lawyers can't spin a published investigation. But if he can have me moved or discredited before it runs. She didn't finish the sign. She didn't need to. He signed, so right now, being here, having an address, being stable, matters. She signed, yes, but I didn't come here for that. I want you to know that. I didn't, he signed, I know. She signed, I'm saying it clearly. I came here because I had nowhere else, and you offered. I didn't plan this. He signed, Maya. I know. She looked at him. She signed, this is going to get complicated. His lawyers are going to look at this situation and make it look like something it's not. A single man with children, a woman living in his house. He'll use it. Ethan was quiet. He thought about his daughters, about Emma doing homework at the kitchen table, about Lily on the piano bench, about the way this household had shifted on its axis in 5 days, in a way that felt, somehow, more right than it had in 3 years. He signed, let him try. She signed, you don't know what he's capable of. He signed, I know what I'm capable of. He leaned forward. You fought him alone for 2 years. You went to a journalist. You filed responses to his legal motions from a shelter. You did all of that alone. He held her gaze. You're not alone right now. That's different. She looked at him for a long time. He could see her working through it. Every angle, every risk, every way this could go wrong. He had learned in 5 days that this was how Maya Collins operated. She mapped the terrain completely before she took a step, because the terrain had hurt her too many times to trust it. She signed, if he comes here. He signed, then he comes here, and we handle it. She signed, we. He signed, yes. She looked at him. Something moved through her face that she didn't sign and didn't speak. Something that lived below the level of language, in the place where people keep the things they're most afraid to want. She looked down at her hands. Then she signed, very quietly. My lawyer needs to know he called. She needs to document it. He signed, call her. She signed, it's Saturday. He signed, she's your lawyer. Call her. The corner of her mouth moved. She picked up her phone. He went back to the kitchen and finished making the coffee and stood at the window, looking out at the backyard. Small, fenced, a dormant garden that he had planted the first spring after the divorce, and then never quite finished. He thought about Richard Collins's voice on the phone, that particular texture, the smoothness of a man who had spent decades getting what he wanted from people by assuming he would get it. He thought about Maya on the ice, the blood on her knuckles, the fury in her face. He thought, she has been fighting this alone, in shelters, with a cracked hinge laptop and a legal aid attorney for 2 years. He thought, and she hasn't stopped. Emma appeared at the kitchen doorway. She looked at him. She said, "You have your problem face." "I have a thinking face." "It looks the same." She came in and poured herself juice. "Is it about Maya?" He looked at her. "Why do you ask that?" "Because you only get that face for things that matter." She said it with the complete straightforwardness of an 11-year-old who has decided to skip the part where you pretend things aren't what they are. "Is she going to have to leave?" He signed, "No." Then, realizing he'd done it in sign rather than speech, said it out loud. "No." Emma looked at him steadily. "You're sure?" "Yeah," he said. "I'm sure." Emma nodded. She took her juice. She said, on her way out, "Good, because Lily already told Gerald he has a big sister now, and it would be really complicated to walk that back." He stood in the kitchen after she left, and the feeling in his chest was too large to name, and he didn't try. In the living room, Maya was on the phone. He couldn't hear the conversation, obviously. She was texting back and forth with her lawyer, he realized, her fingers moving fast over the screen, her face focused and sharp. This was the other Maya, not the one who almost smiled at Lily's pronunciation of ASL letters, not the one who pressed piano keys in the early morning quiet. This was the one who had taken on a Chicago CEO from a shelter on Wabash Street and not blinked. He brought her coffee. He set it on the small table beside her without interrupting. She glanced up, registered it, signed a quick thank you without breaking her rhythm on the phone screen. He sat down on the couch and waited. She put the phone down 20 minutes later. She signed, "My lawyer is filing a motion on Monday. Preemptive. Establishing stable housing, voluntary arrangement, no grounds for intervention." She said the timing is actually good. It documents that I'm housed before his lawyers can argue otherwise. He signed, "Good." She signed, "She also said," she paused. "She said that if you'd be willing to provide a statement about the nature of the arrangement, that it would help." He signed, "Of course." She signed, "It means your name goes on a legal document." He signed, "Okay." She signed, "He might push back on you. His lawyers might look into you. Your business." He signed, "Maya." She signed, "I'm being honest with you about what it costs." He signed, "I know. I'm telling you I don't care." He held her gaze. "Give my number to your lawyer." She looked at him for a long moment. Long enough that he could see her searching for the angle, the reason, the cost, the thing he was getting out of this that justified the risk. Long enough that he understood she had been looking for that calculation in every person for years, and finding it every time. He let her look. He had nothing to hide. She signed slowly. "Why are you doing this?" He said, out loud, clearly enough to read, "Because my daughter told a stuffed rabbit he has a big sister. And I think she's right." Maya stared at him. He said, "And because you hit that ground with your bare hands in January, because you needed someone to look at you. And someone should have looked a long time before I did." She looked away, at the piano, at the window, at her hands. The walls were there, he could see them, but they were different now. Not gone, just older, more tired, less certain of their own necessity. She signed, "I don't know how to do this." He signed, "Do what?" She signed, "This." She gestured, the room, the house, him, all of it. Let people in, without waiting for the part where it goes wrong. He signed, "I know. I haven't been great at it either." She signed, "You have 2 daughters who love you." He signed, "Yeah, and I almost missed that. I was so busy keeping the walls up that I almost didn't notice them knocking." She looked at him. He looked back. From down the hallway came the sound of Lily's voice. She was talking to Gerald, explaining something, her voice carrying the particular cadence of someone making a very serious point to a very attentive audience. The words were indistinct, but the tone was clear, urgent, sincere, completely committed to whatever argument she was making. Maya heard none of it, but she felt the vibration of it through the floor, through the chair, and she turned her head toward the hallway with an expression that had nothing guarded in it at all, that was open and soft, and entirely undefended, the face underneath all the other faces. She turned back to Ethan. She signed, "Your daughter is very loud." He signed, "She comes by it honestly." She signed, "She's been talking to that rabbit for 40 minutes. He signed, "Gerald has strong opinions. The conversations get long." She pressed her lips together. The smile came. Not the edge of one, not the almost, not the hairline fracture. The real thing. Brief, still a little careful, but real. He thought, there it is. He thought, there she is. He picked up his coffee and said nothing, because some things you don't interrupt. Outside, Chicago kept moving. The city indifferent, the January air still cold, the sidewalk on Michigan Avenue salted and gray. Somewhere in a high-rise office on LaSalle Street, Richard Collins was on the phone with his attorneys, moving his pieces into position, calculating the angles the way men like him always calculate, in terms of leverage, liability, narrative control. He didn't know that his daughter was sitting in a row house in Wicker Park, with her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee, listening with her whole body to a world she couldn't hear, and smiling, really smiling, for the first time in 7 years. He didn't know that the man across from her had already decided that whatever was coming, he wasn't stepping aside. He didn't know any of it. That was his first mistake. The article ran on a Thursday. Maya knew it was coming. Her phone had buzzed at 6:40 in the morning with a text from the journalist, a woman named Carol Reyes, who had spent 4 months verifying every detail Maya had given her, and who wrote with a kind of precision that made lawyers nervous. The text said simply, "It's live. Front page of the digital edition. Print runs tomorrow. You okay?" Maya had sat in the early morning quiet of the Calloway house, the rest of the household still asleep, and read the piece 3 times on her cracked hinge laptop. Carol had done it right. Every fact correct, every quote sourced, every number verified. The 12 buildings, the accessibility violations, the HR complaints, the employees who had tried to raise concerns internally and been quietly managed out. And at the center of it, named clearly, documented thoroughly, Richard Collins of Collins Capital, whose charitable giving had earned him 2 humanitarian awards, and whose own daughter had spent 6 months in Chicago's shelter system after he cut her off for trying to hold him accountable. She had put the laptop down and sat with her hands in her lap and looked at the piano. She had done it. After 2 years and a broken wheelchair and a night on the ice and everything that came before and between, she had done it. She expected to feel something large. What she felt instead was very quiet, like the moment after a long storm when the air is still and clear, and you can finally hear the actual world again. She heard, felt, footsteps on the stairs. Ethan's. She had learned the weight of them by now, the particular rhythm. He appeared in the living room doorway in his gray sweatshirt, not yet fully awake, coffee mug in hand. He looked at her face. He looked at the laptop. He said, "It ran." She nodded. He came in and sat on the couch and held out his hand for the laptop. She gave it to him. He read in silence for several minutes. She watched his face while he read, the tightening around his jaw, the stillness that moved through him when he reached the sections about her, about the shelter, about the things her father had said. He finished. He handed the laptop back. He signed, "Carol Reyes is very good at her job." She signed, "I know. That's why I chose her." He signed, "How are you?" She considered this honestly, the way she had learned to do with him, without the reflex answer, without the fortress response. She signed, "Scared," and "not scared." Both. He nodded. He signed, "His lawyers are going to move fast." She signed, "Yes, mine are ready." He signed, "And the motion my statement is attached to? Your lawyer filed it Monday." She signed, "It's in the system. Stable housing, voluntary arrangement, fully documented. He has nothing to argue from." He signed, "Good." She signed, "Ethan." She paused. "If this gets loud, the press, his lawyers, the attention, you can step back. I mean that. You and the girls don't need to be in the middle of this." He looked at her for a long moment. He said, out loud, slowly, "Maya, I already gave a statement to your lawyer with my name on it. I'm in the middle of it. I put myself there." She signed, "I know. I'm giving you an exit." He signed, "I don't want an exit." She signed, "Why?" He said, "Because you don't walk away from people. Not when it matters." She looked at him. He looked back. Outside, Chicago was waking up. The distant pulse of traffic. The particular vibration of a city coming to life that she felt through the floor and the walls, the way she felt everything now. Through the parts of her that had learned to compensate for the parts that couldn't. She signed, "Your daughters." He signed, "My daughters are going to be fine. Em's going to want to read the article and have opinions about it. Lily is going to ask why your dad isn't nicer, and then go back to teaching Gerald sign language." The corner of her mouth moved. She signed, "She taught Gerald sign language?" He signed, "She's been working on it for 3 days. He's struggling with the letter F, but she's patient with him." The smile came. Real, full, unguarded. The one he had decided, privately, was the best thing he'd seen in years. He stood up. He signed, "I'm making breakfast. You should eat before whatever today becomes." She signed, "Ethan." He stopped. She signed, "Thank you." She held his gaze. Not for breakfast, for... She paused. The signs that came next were careful and deliberate, each one chosen. For looking up. From the window. When everyone else looked away. He stood very still. He signed, "You would have figured something out." She signed, "Yes, but I didn't have to." A beat. That's new. He held her gaze for one more moment. Then he went to make breakfast, because some things you say with eggs and coffee and the ordinary machinery of a morning, and they mean more that way than any other. The lawyers called at 9:15. Maya's legal aid attorney, a sharp-voiced woman named Patricia Holt, who had been fighting Richard Collins's motions for 2 years on what amounted to professional principle and a very small budget, called with the kind of energy that meant things were moving. "He filed this morning," Patricia said. "Preemptive petition for a welfare review, citing unstable living situation. He's arguing that your current arrangement is temporary and inadequate, that you require supervised residential care, the usual playbook. But here's the thing." A pause. "The judge is Helen Marsh. She has read the article. It went national this morning. CBS picked it up. Your father is trending on Twitter." Maya was at the kitchen table, phone in hand, Ethan across from her, tracking the half of the conversation he could see. She typed back to Patricia. "What does that mean for the motion?" Patricia said, "It means his lawyers are going to have a very hard time standing in front of Judge Marsh and arguing that the daughter of Richard Collins needs to be placed in residential care for her own protection, when every major outlet in the country is currently running the story of how she ended up in a shelter because he cut her off. The optics are catastrophic for him. His PR team is already in damage control." Maya typed, "So what do we do?" "We show up Monday," Patricia said. "We bring Ethan Calloway's statement. We bring your documentation of stable housing. We bring the published piece as evidence of your competence and judgment. And we let the judge look at Richard Collins and decide which version of this story she believes." Maya put the phone down. She signed to Ethan. "Monday. Hearing." He signed, "I'll be there." She signed, "You don't have to." He signed, "I know." She looked at him. She signed, "It's a Monday. You have work." He signed, "I have a guy named Dave who can run the job on Monday. I've been carrying Dave for 3 years. Dave can do one morning." She pressed her lips together. Then she signed, "Okay." He signed, "Okay." He picked up his coffee. "Now eat your eggs." She ate her eggs. Emma came down at 7:30, read the article on her phone while standing at the kitchen counter eating toast, and said, without looking up, "Your dad sounds like a real piece of work." "Emma," Ethan said. "I'm being accurate," Emma said. "There's a difference." Maya, who had caught enough of it to understand the shape, signed to Ethan. He translated, "She says you sound like me." Emma looked at Maya. She said, "I'll take that." Lily came down at 7:45, Gerald under one arm, and immediately sensed that the morning had a different quality to it, without being able to articulate what it was. She looked at Maya. She looked at her father. She said, "What happened?" Ethan said, "Maya's article came out, the one she's been working on." Lily looked at Maya. "Is that good?" Maya signed, "Yes." "Are you happy?" Maya looked at her. She signed, "Getting there." Lily nodded seriously. She climbed into the chair beside Maya and held Gerald up. She had, over the past several days, worked out a version of the sign for hello that she had been teaching the rabbit through patient repetition. She demonstrated it now, moving the rabbit's paw in the approximate shape of the sign. She looked at Maya. "He's getting better," she said. Maya looked at the rabbit. She signed, "Much better." Lily beamed. Ethan looked at his kitchen. Emma on her phone. Lily and her rabbit. Maya at the table with her coffee and her bandaged hands that were almost healed now. The ordinary Saturday morning chaos of a house that was full in the way houses are supposed to be full. And he thought, this is it. This is the thing I didn't know I was missing. The hearing on Monday lasted 45 minutes. Ethan sat in the hallway outside the courtroom because the hearing was closed, Maya's request, and waited on a wooden bench with his coat on his lap and his phone in his hand and not much ability to concentrate on anything on it. He sat there and thought about the last 9 days, about a woman on the ice and a broken wheelchair, and 2 daughters who had looked out a cafe window and seen something their father almost missed. Patricia Holt came out first, moving fast, and she was smiling in the particular way of a lawyer who has just watched something go exactly the way she planned. She said, "Judge Marsh denied the petition. Full denial, no conditions. She found no basis for intervention, cited stable, voluntary housing arrangement, and Maya's demonstrated capacity for independent decision-making, which she noted was rather extensively documented by this morning's national press." She looked at Ethan. "Your statement helped. The judge read it twice." He said, "What about Collins?" "His lawyers tried to argue that the housing arrangement was informal and temporary," Patricia said. Judge Marsh asked them to define temporary. They couldn't give a satisfactory answer. She wasn't impressed. A pause. Richard Collins was in the gallery. He didn't speak. You can't speak in a closed hearing. But he was there. "How was Maya?" Patricia looked at him with the expression of someone who is reassessing something. She said, "She was the clearest, calmest, most prepared person in that room. She had documentation for everything. She answered every question directly." The judge, and I have appeared before Judge Marsh many times. I know what her face does. The judge looked at Maya Collins and saw someone who has been fighting for herself with no support for 2 years and is still standing. That matters. The courtroom door opened. Maya came out in the motorized wheelchair that had arrived the previous Thursday. Her own, repaired, the axle rebuilt, the motor housing replaced, and she was moving at a pace that said she was not interested in lingering in this hallway a moment longer than necessary. She came through the door and saw Ethan and stopped. He signed, "Well?" She signed, "He lost." He signed, "How do you feel?" She signed, "Like I want to go home." He signed, "Then let's go home." They went home. Richard Collins called that evening. Maya took the call. Ethan did not ask her to tell him what was said, because it wasn't his conversation. He sat in the living room with Emma and Lily and watched a nature documentary about elephants that Lily had selected and that Emma was pretending to be too old for, while clearly being entirely engaged. And he let Maya have her privacy. She came back 20 minutes later. She sat in the doorway of the living room and looked at the television for a moment. The elephants, a herd of them moving across a wide plain. And then she signed to Ethan. He's not going to fight it. His PR team told him to stop making it worse. The article has been picked up by 14 outlets. His board of directors asked for a meeting. He signed. What did he say to you? She looked at her hands. She signed. He said... She paused. He said he was sorry, that it came out the way it did. He signed. The way it came out, not what he did. She signed. Yes. A long beat. He has a very precise relationship with apology. He signed. Are you okay? She signed. I don't need him to be sorry. I needed him to stop. She looked at the television. He's going to stop. That's enough. He signed. Is it? She looked at him. She signed, honestly. I don't know yet, but it's what I have. He nodded. He shifted over on the couch. He signed, Come watch the elephants. Lily has feelings about them. They stay together, Lily said immediately, not looking away from the screen. Even when things are hard. The whole herd. They don't leave each other. Emma said, That's not exactly. It's more complicated than... They stay together, Lily repeated, with the authority of someone who has decided what a thing means and is not interested in nuance. Maya wheeled herself to the space beside the couch. She looked at the elephants on the screen, the herd moving together, the smallest ones in the center, the larger ones at the edges, the whole thing organized around protecting what mattered most. She signed to Ethan, small and private. "She's not wrong." He signed, "She's almost never wrong. It's a problem." The almost smile came, then the real smile, full and unguarded, and she turned back to the television and watched the herd move. 3 weeks later, Ethan came home on a Tuesday afternoon to find Lily sitting on the piano bench beside Maya, and Maya's hands over Lily's, guiding them through a chord. Not just middle C anymore, an actual chord, 3 notes together, Lily's face set with concentration, Maya patient and still beside her. He stood in the hallway and listened to the imperfect, earnest sound of it and did not move, because some things you don't interrupt. The chord resolved. Lily looked up at Maya. Maya signed, "Again." Lily played it again. "Better." Maya signed, "Again." Emma was at the kitchen table with her homework. She called, without looking up, "She's been doing that for an hour." He said, "Yeah?" Maya makes her play it until it's right, like actually right. A pause. "It's right now." He hung his coat up. He went to the kitchen doorway and looked at his daughter's homework on the table. Geography, he could see. A map with labels. And at Emma's pen moving across it, confident and quick. He thought, 3 weeks ago she was asking me if Maya was going to have to leave. He thought, a lot can change in 3 weeks. He went to the living room doorway. Lily was playing the chord again, unprompted, because Maya had let go of her hands and Lily was doing it herself now. Her small fingers on the keys. The notes ringing out. Imperfect still, a little heavy, but right. Maya sat beside her with her palms resting on her own knees, not guiding, not correcting, just present, just there. She looked up and saw Ethan in the doorway. He signed, "How is she?" Maya signed, "She has a good ear." A pause. "She hears what I can't." He signed, "Does that bother you?" She signed, "No." She looked at Lily, at the small hands finding the keys. "She hears it for both of us. That's enough." He stood in the doorway of his living room in a row house in Wicker Park on a Tuesday afternoon in February and looked at his daughters and at the woman who had come into his house through a cafe window and a broken wheelchair, and the grace of one moment of paying attention. And he felt something settle in him, something that had been unsettled for 3 years, since the parking lot and the word permanent, and the life that split down the middle and became something he hadn't planned for. It settled, quietly, without announcement. That evening, after dinner, after Lily was in bed and Emma was reading and the house had gone into its nighttime register, Ethan sat on the couch, and Maya sat near the piano, and he said, out loud, carefully, I know we haven't talked about what this is." She was watching his mouth. She waited. He said, "I don't need to define it. I'm not asking you to define it. He stopped. He signed instead because it felt more honest, more direct, more like something he meant. "I don't want you to think this has an expiration date." She looked at him. She signed, "Your life was fine before I showed up." He signed, "My life was functional. That's not the same thing." She signed, "Ethan." He signed, "I looked up from my coffee, and I saw you on the ground, and I went outside. That's all I did. You did the rest. You walked." He stopped, signed differently. "You moved into this house, and you played the piano, and you taught my daughter chords, and you fought your father in court, and you did all of it with—" He paused. "With more grace than anyone I've ever known. I just looked up. You did everything else." She was very still. Her jaw moved slightly, that small tell she had when something was getting through the walls before she could stop it. She signed, "I don't know what I'm doing." He signed, "Neither do I. But I know I'm not done." She looked at him. He looked back. She signed slowly, one sign at a time. "Neither am I." He held her gaze. The house was quiet around them, the good kind of quiet, the kind that is full rather than empty, the kind that holds people inside it rather than apart. He signed, "Then we figure it out." She looked at the piano. She looked at her hands. She looked at him. And Maya Collins, who had survived everything, who had fought alone for so long that aloneness had become her native country, who had learned to make do with a diner booth and a cracked hinge laptop and the fierce private conviction that she would figure it out, reached across the space between them and placed her hand briefly over his. Not a long gesture, not dramatic, just a hand, placed deliberately for exactly the time she meant it to last. Then she moved to the piano. She opened the fallboard. She placed her hands on the keys, and she played. Not the careful, feeling her way Satie of that first morning. Not the tentative, private things she had allowed herself when no one was watching. She played fully, with both hands, filling the room with it. A Chopin nocturne, the one that had been on the stand when she first sat down. The one she had been working toward without quite letting herself know it. It wasn't perfect. 7 years away from an instrument leaves marks that patience has to work back through. But it was hers, entirely, undeniably, powerfully hers. And it moved through the house the way real music does, through the walls and the floors and the bones of the people inside it. Upstairs, Lily woke from a light sleep, felt the vibration of it through her mattress, and smiled in the dark without fully knowing why. Emma put her book down and sat very still in her room and listened. Ethan sat on the couch and did not move and did not speak, and let the music be what it was. And in the row house in Wicker Park, on a February night in Chicago, in a life that none of them had planned and all of them had chosen, the Calloway family, all of them, every last one, was exactly where they were supposed to be. Some things break you open to let the right things in. Some people find you on the ice when the whole world has walked past. Some families are not born, but built, note by note, word by word, one deliberate act of looking up at exactly the right moment. And once built, they do not break.